Thank you so much for joining us today. This is one of our amazing trainings that we love to give to our Workspace Spark subscribers. So today our topic is managing the crazy, successfully handle the daily drama at work. And we have one of the best people who can talk about this. She's an amazing author and great person that can talk about this because our founder has read her book and thought it was simply amazing, so we wanted to bring her on. So I'm going to read her bio and introduce you to Angela Hoskins, who will be our trainer for today. So Angela Hoskins, MBA, MSN, is a women's empowerment and leadership author. Speaker and author, workshop facilitator, coach, and the owner of Her One Tribe LLC. Angela combines her 10 years of healthcare executive leadership experience with her expertise as a women's empowerment writer to deliver impactful workshops and motivational speeches. Using her self-developed personal empowerment framework as her cornerstone content, Angela educates and inspires national and international female audiences to unlock their influence, their confidence, barriers, and diminish their imposter syndrome. Angela is the author of Woman on Top, Leading Like a Lady Boss, and hosts an online community at heronetribe.com for aspiring women to find education, inspiration, and support with their fellow sisters. Thank you so much and welcome, Angela.
Well, thank you. I'm really glad to be here and have this conversation with you and your tribe.
Yes. So tell us if there's anything I missed out of your bio, a little bit about your career path as a nurse.
Sure. Well, I tell everybody I was a second career nurse. I started out with a bachelor's of English and I wanted to be a writer. So it's funny how my life has come full circle. I figured out I needed something to write about. So I started a second degree in my early 30s in nursing. I had a nurse that took care of me when I had my first daughter and started to be interested in how I could help take care of other people. And she inspired me. So went back to school, got that nursing degree, and ended up on an oncology unit taking care of mostly women oncology patients. I never wanted to be a leader. I just wanted to take care of my patients. But luckily, I had a female mentor who kept tapping me on the shoulder, literally, telling me that I was missing my calling and that leadership was where I needed to be and I needed to follow in her footsteps. So over the next 10 years, I continued my education, got my master's in business administration and in healthcare leadership, and took over my very first manager job with 100 direct reports and hit the ground running in leadership.
Wow. Nothing like someone who sees something in you that you don't see in yourself. I have been blessed to have someone like that as well. So it's so good to hear that, you always hear the thing that women don't support people or people don't really support you in industries. And it's so good that someone saw that leadership in you and pushed you in that direction.
Well, and I think too, I'm sure you've heard the Harvard Business Review study that men apply to the job when they have 60% of the capabilities and women don't even apply when they have 100%. So I think oftentimes we women need someone else to tell us, you know what, you've got this skill set, you would do phenomenal, and you should take a shot at it.
Yes, awesome. Sometimes we deal with a lot of negative attitude. So my next question is, let's say someone has a staff member or a colleague that has a negative attitude every day. They don't seem to have anything good to say about the job. What can they do?
Well, this is interesting. When I wrote my book, Woman on Top, Lead Like a Lady Boss, I wrote a book that I was looking for. I was searching for a leadership book that was very tactical and practical and explained the managing people part to help us to understand in conflict, what's the best way to handle it? Because at the end of the day, you're handling many different people with different values, different backgrounds, different coping skills, different motivational skills. And so you really have to, as the leader, tap into and understand what makes each person tick. And the number one question I received often was, well, what do you do when there's that person that you work with or is on your team that is just so negative? How do you handle that? And so oftentimes I think the first thing that we think to do is, run and tell the boss, right? Go and share our concern with the boss. And a new leader might take that I used to call it the monkey on the back. They used to take that feedback and say, oh, let me fix this. But really, oftentimes, what you need to do first is to talk, to get to know that person a little bit better. So if it's somebody that rubs you the wrong way, usually it's because you have conflicting values. It's usually because something that they say or do, or something that you say or doesn't seem right to them in the world. And so the first prescription I would give you would be to try to get to know that person a little bit better as a person. Ask them some questions about how they ended up in their role, what makes them happy about the job that they do. Ask them about their family. Ask them about what lights their heart on fire. And oftentimes, just taking that moment to begin to see the person behind the personality is what can help spark that relationship and that connection. And it may not change their personality, but it may help you to understand them a little bit better. And as you begin to build that relationship, then there's an opportune time to give some feedback that might be well received.
I love that person behind the personality. And I think that sometimes we forget people are people and they have different personalities, different values. So that's a great point. How can people approach leadership about negative people without seeming like a snitch or someone who's telling on someone? I think that's kind of a really hard area for a lot of leaders.
I think, at least from my perspective, when someone comes to me with a conflict or a confusion as to how to move forward, and they have tried to handle it themselves, so they have pulled the person aside, they have tried to have that conversation. I think I think that you need to go to your leader with, these are the solutions that I've tried. These are the things that I think might work and that I've tried, but it hasn't been working. What do you have in your toolbox that might help me approach it in a different way? I think sometimes the leader knows things intimately about each of the people working for her or him that the colleague might not know, and can lend some context, or they've learned a way to communicate with that person that has been effective, and they can help give that person that's going to the leader some tricks and tips about, well, you might want to approach it this way. I did a lot of role playing and offered what I call Socratic questioning or humble inquiry. When someone is giving you negative feedback, just tell me a little bit more about that, or help me to understand a little bit more about that. So I think going with what you've tried, I think going with what your ask is of the leader, and then being open to role playing or having the leader help you, then take that back to the person. If it's really escalated, then I'll bring both people in together to have a very open conversation, and allow each person to share their perspective, because we all know there's her story, his story, and the real story, right?
Yes, I think it's good too, when things get escalated, creating a safe place where people can talk about their perception, because sometimes it's just a misunderstanding from my experiences I've seen in leadership and in the workplace. So, our topic is managing the crazy and the drama at work. And, a lot of us have found ourselves working from home more, and it doesn't change that there is typically some drama. So as a leader, how can you change the culture, or how can you contribute to make sure that the culture is a lot less drama?
Well, I think it starts first with the leader yourself. I think you have to do some self-awareness education, and understand truly what your values are as a leader and what your beliefs are. Until you can understand your values and beliefs, it's very difficult for you to be able to understand the lens view that you're coming to the conversation with. And oftentimes that's the first place to start. And many times when I ask leaders to select their top 3 or 4 values, they have a difficult time doing that. So I think, doing an exercise, one of the exercises in my workbook is to discover your top 3 to 5 values and your core beliefs. What kind of core beliefs do you have about work ethic? What kind of core beliefs do you have about how people should treat people? What is polite? What is rude? And understanding those things first will help you as a leader to be able to open that conversation up to your teammates, to have them do some reflection as well with that. I think with what's going on with COVID and a lot of us are being remote, I definitely see the packed in the communication at work. A lot more people are sending emails. Oftentimes we think it's just real easy to share our feelings or our concerns through an email, but email is very flat and can be misconstrued and misinterpreted, especially if someone's feeling overwhelmed or frustrated. And so my rule of thumb is, if it's something that is a crucial conversation, pick up the phone and schedule a coffee meeting or schedule a Skype meeting and have a conversation, rather than rattling off I need you to do this, and or this was disappointing to me. I also find that the two-way, you and I are talking right now, two-way, two-ply video, you miss a lot of the facial expressions, the body language, the shifting in the seat, the eyes drifting away, things that might be subtle cues when you're having a conversation with someone that you're losing interest, or that they don't understand you, or that they're bored. It's hard on video. So I think that, giving some space and grace in that, and asking more questions about, well, tell me a little bit more about that. I'm trying to see where you're coming from, so that you can understand the context behind the conversation is very helpful. And I think having more frequent check-ins. I think, I know that when I was behind the office doors and not visibly walking the unit, or not looking at each person's eyes and sort of sensing where they were in the moment, I was really at a disadvantage. So I think as much as possible to have that, even if it's virtual, eyes on your team, to really ask the questions and see how they're responding, body language and in their communication styles.
Awesome. You had so many gems in that, because space and grace is so needed right now, not for just, your people that you manage, but yourself as a leader. You said in your workbook that you had understanding your values. I think sometimes as leaders, we're so focused on building our teams up that we never really look at who we are as a leader and what our leadership style is. I think that's really, really important, and a great tip that you provided. And then the emails, agreed. I think that, so I work in the digital space, and it's so funny because as a project manager, I'm a people person, and I love to pick up the phone, and my coworkers are like, why didn't you just send an email? Because I do believe that sometimes having those conversations are important. But let's talk about email. So my next question is, sometimes you get those nasty emails, and you get, someone maybe CCing in the entire world, throwing you under the bus or whatever, and you're tempted to send something nasty back. What is a good approach to that, or what would you tell your team?
So I have the 24-hour rule. So if I get an email where I am either feeling threatened, or it's a conflict, or thrown under the bus, or something was explained not factually, but with someone's perception, I wait a full 24 hours and I allow it to marinate. I try to get a little bit more context privately from that person. So if they've carbon copied my boss and my boss's boss and 20 other people, I might reach out to that person individually first and say, I'm trying to understand your email. I have a few questions about it before I respond to everyone. This is what I was thinking, and get a little more information so that I can appropriately respond to the entire group with a little more context. But that 24 hours gives me time to take the feelings out of it, to think about what I want to say in a way that is still keeping the professional bar, and maybe role modeling, professional behavior. Everyone on that email can see if it's a throw under the bus, can see that. And so they're not only are they watching for the response, but they're watching how you handle the response. So it really is an opportune time for you as a leader to take the high road and not knee-jerk react. I also think it's appropriate, and I have done this in the past, where I've emailed the person back or called them personally and said, in the future, I would appreciate if it's a conflictual situation, could you please email me first and give me the opportunity to talk with you and explain before you copy 10 other people. I wouldn't do that to you in a meeting. I wouldn't expect you to do that to me in a meeting. Let's not do it in the virtual space as well too. And that takes some guts. It takes some guts to say that in a professional way, but setting those boundaries is important. And that person may not have nearly the emotional intelligence that you do, and they may disregard your ask, but at least you are putting that ask out there and you're setting a boundary. And I also think it's really important to remember that we judge ourselves on intent and we judge others on behavior. So I have no way of knowing what is in your brain. I can only fill in the gaps based on what I've experienced before with you, what I know about you, and what I'm assuming is the issue with the email. So, to your point, you said earlier, we're making assumptions about why somebody did something. I'll give you a perfect example. I had someone in my office who was really upset. It was about a side project, and they found out that they were left off the project meeting planner and the email chain, and they thought that they were an important person that needed to be in that meeting. And so they're over here finding out from other people that well, why weren't you on the email? Well, I don't know why I wasn't on the email. And their initial assumption was, I'm being left out. Somebody doesn't want me to contribute. Somebody doesn't think that I'm worthy enough or good enough. And do you know what the truth was? The person forgot to put their name on the email.
Easy thing to do.
And so finding yourself into that situation, the easiest thing to do is to email the person who sent the planner and say, oh, I heard Jane told me you sent a planner and I think you may have left me off, I've done that. We've all done that, right? We went, oh my gosh, I didn't mean to exclude you. But oftentimes I think there's a saying in healthcare, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. And so obvious things, common things being common and obvious things being obvious, the answer to what happened is probably the most common and obvious reason, and not this whole, contrived story that you've created in your head about why this person doesn't like you.
No, I think that's great. I love the 24-hour rule. I'm going to adopt that myself because I do think that sometimes we act out of emotion and we take things personal. And a lot of times it's not. And you mentioned earlier, email is flat, right? And you don't really see the intent behind it or what they meant to say. Everyone does not. I work in the tech space. Everyone does not have the great communication or personal skills. So sometimes those emails come across really wrong. And I have, just being transparent, have responded back, probably not in the tone that I should have because I took it personally. So I probably need to adopt that 24-hour rule myself. So that was a great, great tip.
A colleague I have also, what she does is she writes the response and then puts it in a draft for 24 hours. So she is giving herself the release of wanting to say what she wants to say, but then giving herself 24 hours to read over it. Ooh. And it's interesting if you do that, because you might be like, oh goodness, I'm so glad I didn't send that.
That's a good one. I'd be afraid I might send it. But no, that's good because at least you can release it, right? Because I think that's another thing too. We try to hold it all in with all this stuff. And then you're mad at that person all day. So no, I think those are really good tips. Kind of in the same realm, if you're in a meeting and, either virtually or in person, being completely thrown under the bus, maybe lied on or an entire story wasn't said. How can you defend yourself without seeming defensive? You gave a few tips earlier, but are there anything else that we can do?
Yeah, I think so. The first tricky question is, okay, somebody says something that's just not factual, their interpretation of what something happened or the end result to that, and you're over here going, no, that's not what happened. It's completely appropriate, when they finish speaking, to say, actually, I have those numbers with me, or actually, I think there was a miscommunication there. This is actually what I know to be happening. Don't go silent. As women, we're like, oh, we don't want to make that's embarrassing to correct somebody, but people will remember that incorrect fact. And so if it's incorrect, you have the obligation to correct it, but you don't want to be like, oh no, that's wrong. You want to be able to say it in a way that actually, I think there was a miscommunication there, or perhaps I think you misspoke, something in a way that gives the other person an easy out that they didn't mean to make a mistake. You need to put it out there. I also think that women, and I just read an article the other day, again, we are super polite. We give up our seats. We defer the audience to allow somebody else to speak. And I think in a virtual setting as well, too, it can be awkward, and there can be hiccups and interruptions. You're trying to figure out when it's okay to talk, when somebody else isn't speaking. And so I think that it's good to make sort of a visual clue if you're on a Zoom meeting that you have something to say. And oftentimes I'll do this. I'll be like, put my hand up. I have something to comment, or I have something to put in so that I'm noticed, rather than just sitting there waiting for the right interjection and trying not to stomp on somebody else's voice, is a great way. Some Zoom meetings that I've been in, they have the hand raise where you can raise your hand virtually. So that's another way to do it. But I think, making sure that you're not foregoing your value and your input because you don't want to interject or stomp on somebody else.
Agreed. I think that I've seen that in my industry, both men and women, waiting for their turn. And unfortunately,
Right.
often there's no waiting in a line. It's interject when you can, especially in this virtual space. So great tip. I totally agree with that. And how can we set boundaries as leaders or individual contributors with negative people?
Well, you're always going to have negative people in your life. How you allow them your time and your energy is up to you. I've always been an open door person. I used to be literally an open door person, when I had 100 direct reports, and I had two things in my office. I had a box of chocolates and a box of tissues. So the chocolates were to kind of engage people to sort of poke in my office, and I could say, how are you doing? And the tissues were for those closed door conversations sometimes. But with that open door, you also get the negative Nancy, who every single day wants to come in and vent about something. And so I've learned that after that year or so of doing that, because then your time is sucked right on out of you, is that when someone comes with me, if I've got a concern, an issue, a problem, I need to talk to you about it. And I would then say, oh, great, I have time on Thursday at 2:00. Let me put you on my calendar, and we'll meet for 30 minutes Thursday at 2:00. And that does two things. That gives the person time to ponder and get rid of their anxious or upset feelings. It's not as maybe urgent as they thought it was going to be. It also gives them time to maybe solve their own problem and think through it. Oftentimes what I would find is, Thursday at 2:00 would come and they would pop into my office. You know what, I've handled it, we're good. And that builds their critical thinking and their confidence. So that's one thing that I learned to do. I think, I talk about in my book, the vampires of no accountability. So there are two types of people in the office. There are just, the regular negative folks that are maybe just a little more pessimistic or have their worldview is a little more guarded and protected. And then there's what I call the vampires of no accountability. And I'm certain every single one of us have worked with someone like this. This is the person that has never had anything nice to say. They've never contributed anything in the communal culture in a positive way. They are disruptors. They are life suckers. They can't wait for the new hire to come in so they can say, leadership doesn't listen. If you just ignore them, they'll go away. They never do anything. I've been here for 20 years. They're those type of people. And they may be great at their technical work, but they're a lousy employee and they are a lousy contributor to the team. And so I will tell you that that's the number one thing as a leader that you've got to get rid of. No matter how great their work product is, you either try to rehabilitate them or you get them out, because they are the poison apple in your bunch. And you will never have the high performing work culture team as long as you have a vampire no accountability. So if you're a leader who's trying to work with or coach a vampire no accountability, you have to identify them early on. And they're not hard, right? We all you could immediately think of somebody.
Oh yeah, I got like 3 people in my head.
Yes. And so I think initially setting some time apart to think through how they impact you emotionally and drain your energy, and limit the amount of time that you are spending with them and focusing on their draining needs, and really spend the bulk of your time encouraging, coaching, motivating your high performers, because the squeaky wheel is not where your 100% of attention needs to be, and your team will resent you. If you've got high performers and you are spending all your time trying to placate Larry because he's the unhappiest person on the planet, they're going to be like, well, why am I here? He gets all of this attention and all of these rules that he doesn't have to follow, yet here I am busting my hiney and not getting any of her attention. So I think you need to set boundaries as it relates to time and scheduling with these people. You need to set clear communication boundaries. And if there is workplace behavior or communication styles, toxic speak that is happening, you have to be very clear about what is acceptable and what is not. And you say, you cannot say things like this, 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 and this in this work environment. And let me refer you back to, our team charter or our team rules or our team policies as it relates to that. But ultimately, the responsibility lies with you as the leader to manage them or manage them out.
No, I think this is so great because a lot of times we allow people as leaders because we want the job done. So we will allow some behaviors to pass because they do such a great job. At the end of the day, those people, those bad poison apple people can definitely harm your team. And I've seen it firsthand at a company I used to work for. And eventually that person left on their own, but when they left, you could see this big release and relief from the group, which was a clear indication that that person probably should have been removed from the team a long time ago to really get the work done we needed.
And I think that is a misnomer. Most high-performing teams will tell you they would rather work short than work with somebody that just drains the life out of them. And so, oftentimes new leaders, it's hire slow and fire fast. And I think when you're a new leader, you're just like, you lament over the hiring process, but you take forever to get that person out of there. And that's the biggest mistake I made as a new leader. And definitely one that is correctable and easy to follow, tactical. I kind of walk through each chapter. I walk through exactly like how do you do this and how do you do that. I start the book by talking about I had to fire my first employee in my first 30 days as a new manager, and I was just like, what is this? What is even happening? What am I doing? But it was such a dysfunctional team that result ended up beginning to be the first piece of building trust with my team, that they had somebody on their side, because this person was, not only were they incompetent, but they were just the most horrible human being on that unit. And we were one person short, but they were like, you could, like you said, oh, thank goodness, I don't have to dread coming to work tomorrow.
Yeah, and there is nothing like trusting leadership. Boy, if you have a good leader and you can trust that they have your back and have your best interests at all times, you will follow them to the moon and back. So such great tips. I really appreciate you. I know managing the crazy and daily drama at work is something that a lot of people don't really want to talk about. It's not the cute side of leadership that most trainings that we hear about. So we really appreciate you coming on. Are there any other great tips that you want to leave before we close out?
I think, when you are promoted or you're a new leader or you're new to a new position, you oftentimes think that you have to have all of the answers and that you should know how to handle all of these things because you have the title of boss. And I think that was the biggest misnomer for me. So I think finding a group of like-minded role models, women that you admire, that you have seen behave in a certain way, and tap into their wisdom and ask, what lessons have you learned? Because all of us were there at one time or another, and we all made some similar mistakes. But if you can, tag into a role model or a mentor, somebody that can share those lessons with you and what they learned along the way, then you don't have to have that long learning curve. And that was my problem with writing the book. First of all, if you go to a bookstore and look at leadership books, 99% of them are written by men. And I felt like, well, I as a woman, I brought something different to the leadership table, and I didn't have to lead like a man to be successful. I thought what I brought to the table was what made me successful, and it also made me very much who I am as a person, which is a communicator and a listener and somebody who likes to work and inspire other people. And so I think, finding yourself some resources and role models that you can tap into and learn from is a lot easier than learning it the hard way.
Oh, yes, I totally agree. So again, thank you so much for coming and joining us. And I'm sure our subscribers are going to grab a bunch of gems. I have some gems from here. I'm going to start my 24-hour response time. So I'm going to take some gems with this, and I know our subscribers will too. If you can just share with everyone how to connect with you.
Sure.
We close out.
Sure. My website is www.her onetribe.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Angela L. Hosking. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. And then I'm also on Instagram at Her One Tribe. And lastly, but not least, if you're interested, the book is Woman on Top, Lead Like a Lady Boss, and that's available at Amazon in ebook or paperback, and also at Barnes & Noble. So appreciate that.
And we are looking forward to having Women on Top in our boxes for our subscribers early next year. So subscribers, be on the lookout. Thank you again, Angela. We really appreciate it, and we hope that you have a great day.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.